The massive council chamber stretched out like a small city, with floating platforms arranged in perfect circles around a central holographic display. Representatives from 47 different species filled the space, their various forms creating a bizarre collection of shapes, colors, and sizes. Some breathed oxygen, others methane, and a few didn't breathe at all. The universal translators hummed constantly, converting thousands of languages into something everyone could understand. Jake Morrison sat comfortably in the human section, his simple blue uniform looking plain compared to the elaborate robes and ceremonial armor worn by other ambassadors. He held a steaming cup of coffee in one hand and a tablet in the other, reviewing reports from Earth's outer colonies. The morning briefing had been routine so far, covering trade agreements and shipping schedules. Jake had been looking forward to finishing early and catching up on some reading. That peaceful morning ended when Admiral Zeftar of the Vorthan Empire burst through the chamber doors. The massive reptilian warrior stood nearly 3 meters tall, his scaled skin gleaming under the chamber lights. His forearms gestured wildly as he rushed toward the central platform, his heavy footsteps echoing through the vast space. Every conversation stopped immediately. The Vorthans were known for their calm, disciplined approach to everything. Seeing their top military leader in such a state sent ripples of concern through the assembled delegates. Emergency session, Zeftar's voice boomed through the chamber's speakers. Priority Alpha situation in the Andromeda sector. He activated the central display, and the peaceful star charts disappeared, replaced by a horrifying scene of destruction. Where dozens of star systems should have been, only empty space remained. The outer rim of the galaxy showed a growing void, expanding slowly but steadily toward the inhabited regions. The chamber erupted in panic. The Crystalline Collective's representative, a being made entirely of living crystal, began flashing rapid sequences of colored light that the translators interpreted as mathematical calculations of doom. The Ethereal Union's ambassador, a creature that looked like living mist contained in a humanoid shape, started broadcasting waves of psychic distress that made everyone feel deeply uncomfortable. Even the normally stoic Silicon Brotherhood began running complex analysis programs that filled their section with the sound of whirring processors. Jake took a sip of his coffee and leaned forward slightly, curious about what could cause such a reaction from the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. He had seen these species handle everything from stellar collapse to interdimensional invasions with remarkable composure. Whatever was happening in the Andromeda sector had to be something truly extraordinary. Admiral Zeftar waited for the initial panic to subside before continuing his briefing. 3 days ago, our deep space monitors detected massive energy signatures moving through the outer rim systems. Initial reports suggested a natural phenomenon, possibly a rogue black hole or stellar anomaly. Our investigation fleet was destroyed before they could send a detailed report. Only one ship escaped, and their sensor logs revealed something far worse than any natural disaster. The display shifted to show grainy footage from the surviving scout ship. In the center of the image, a massive structure moved through space like a mechanical storm. It looked like a city-sized collection of rotating rings and extending arms, all focused around a central core that pulsed with malevolent energy. As they watched, the structure approached a small planet and began tearing it apart with invisible forces, drawing the debris into its central mass. "The Void Eater," Zeftar said, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried through the entire chamber. "We thought they were legends, stories told to frighten young warriors. But the archives don't lie. These constructs have appeared 3 times in recorded galactic history. Each time, they consumed entire civilizations before disappearing back into the void between galaxies." The Crystalline Collective's representative began projecting historical data directly into everyone's minds. Images of dead worlds, empty star systems, and the ruins of once great civilizations filled their thoughts. The constructs appeared every few million years, following no pattern that any species could determine. They consumed everything in their path, growing larger and more powerful with each system they devoured. Jake found the historical data interesting but not particularly alarming. Humanity had dealt with plenty of extinction-level threats in their short time among the stars. They had survived AI rebellions, alien invasions, and even a few interdimensional incidents. The galaxy seemed to produce new threats on a regular schedule, and humans had developed a practical approach to handling them. Current projections show the Void Eater will reach the inhabited sectors in approximately 6 months, Zeftar continued. At its current rate of consumption, it will have devoured enough matter to become unstoppable long before our combined fleets can mount an effective response. We estimate it will reach the core systems within 2 years. The chamber filled with desperate conversations as representatives contacted their home worlds and military commands. The merchant guilds began calculating the cost of evacuating entire sectors. The Academic Alliance started accessing their archives for any information about previous encounters with the constructs. The War Council species began discussing which systems they could sacrifice to buy time for their more important worlds. Jake finished his coffee and raised his hand politely. The universal translators picked up his gesture and highlighted the human section for the chamber's attention. Conversations gradually died down as 47 species turned to look at the human representative. "Excuse me," Jake said in his calm, conversational tone. "I hate to interrupt, but I have a quick question about this Void Eater thing." He gestured toward the display, where the massive construct continued its systematic destruction. "Have you tried turning it off and on again?" The chamber fell completely silent. Not just quiet, but absolutely silent in a way that only happened when an entire room full of beings stopped breathing, thinking, and processing information all at the same time. The question hung in the air like a physical object, too strange and simple for anyone to immediately understand. Admiral Zeftar's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of extreme confusion among his species. "I'm sorry, Ambassador Morrison, could you repeat that question?" "Well," Jake said, setting down his empty coffee cup and standing up casually. "It sounds like this thing is some kind of ancient machine, right? And it's acting in ways that probably aren't part of its original programming. So my first thought would be to check if it's having technical difficulties. Maybe reboot the system, run some diagnostics, see if we can figure out what's wrong with it." The silence stretched on for another full minute before the chamber exploded into chaos. Some species began shouting in their native languages, overwhelming the translation systems. Others started broadcasting confused emotional states that filled the room with a mixture of disbelief, anger, and something that might have been hope. Captain Lisa Ford received the priority transmission while her ship, the Defiant, was conducting routine patrol exercises near the Terran border. The message was brief and typically understated in the way that human military communications tended to be. "Investigate reported threat in Andromeda sector. Assess situation and recommend appropriate response. Standard first contact protocols apply." Lisa read the message twice, noted the lack of urgency indicators, and filed it under routine assignments. Another day. Another galactic crisis that needed the human touch. Captain Lisa Ford stood on the bridge of the Defiant, watching the Andromeda sector grow larger on the main screen. The journey had taken 3 days, and during that time she had received increasingly frantic updates from the Galactic Council. Refugee fleets were already mobilizing from the outer rim systems. Emergency broadcasts filled the communication channels with evacuation orders and desperate pleas for military assistance. The galaxy's greatest powers were treating the situation like the end of everything. Lisa sipped her morning coffee and reviewed the sensor data one more time. The readings were certainly impressive in terms of scale, but she had learned not to trust first impressions when dealing with alien technology. Humans had a habit of looking at things differently than other species, often finding simple explanations for phenomena that drove entire civilizations to panic. "What do you think, Danny?" she asked her chief engineer, who was hunched over his workstation analyzing energy signatures from the target area. Danny Walsh looked up from his screens with the expression of someone who had just solved a particularly annoying puzzle. He was a compact man with graying hair and the kind of practical demeanor that came from 30 years of fixing things that other people insisted were unfixable. "Well, Captain, based on these readings, I'd say we're looking at basically a really big, really angry Roomba." The bridge crew turned to stare at him. Navigation Officer Ben Parker raised an eyebrow and asked, "A Roomba?" "Yeah, you know." Danny gestured at his screens. "One of those automated cleaning robots. Look at these movement patterns." He transferred his data to the main display, showing the Void Eater's path through the Andromeda sector. It's following a systematic grid search pattern. It approaches each system from the same angle, processes the materials in the same order every time, and moves on to the next target following a predictable sequence. Dr. Amy Chen, the ship's xenoarchaeologist, joined the conversation from her station near the science section. She was a young woman with an intense curiosity about alien civilizations and a talent for understanding how different species approached technology. Danny's right about the patterns. I've been comparing this thing's behavior to known examples of automated systems from other ancient civilizations. The movement profile matches terraforming and construction protocols, not military or weapon systems. Communications specialist Nicole Grant looked up from her console with a puzzled expression. But the Galactic Council said this thing has destroyed 3 civilizations. How does a cleaning robot become an extinction-level threat? Amy pulled up her research files and shared them with the bridge displays. That's what I've been trying to figure out. The historical records about previous Void Eater encounters are fragmentary, mostly written by survivors who were more focused on escaping than conducting scientific analysis. But the few technical details we have suggest these constructs weren't originally designed as weapons. The main screen shifted to show Amy's reconstruction of the historical data. Ancient star charts displayed the paths of previous Void Eater encounters, and the patterns were unmistakable. Each construct had followed the same systematic approach, methodically processing star systems in organized sequences rather than random destruction. My theory, Amy continued, is that these things are terraforming tools that have malfunctioned. Think about it. If you wanted to prepare a star system for colonization, you'd need to clear out debris, organize raw materials, and catalog everything for efficient construction. That's exactly what this construct is doing, except it never received the signal to stop. Tactical Officer Steve Coleman had been quietly running combat simulations while listening to the discussion. He was a methodical man who preferred to understand threats thoroughly before making recommendations about how to handle them. The defensive systems match Amy's theory, too. These aren't military-grade weapons designed to fight other ships. They're automated safety protocols, probably meant to keep maintenance crews away during active operations. Ben Parker nodded in agreement. The navigation data supports that assessment. This thing is following standard geological survey routes, the kind of patterns you'd use for systematic resource mapping. It's just operating on a much larger scale than anything we've seen before. Lisa considered the information from her crew while watching the sensor readings update in real time. The construct was currently processing a small asteroid field, breaking down the rocky debris with methodical precision. Every few hours it would pause its work to run what appeared to be diagnostic routines, checking its systems and updating its operational parameters. So you're telling me, Lisa said slowly, that the greatest threat in galactic history is actually a broken piece of construction equipment? That's my assessment, Danny replied. A very large, very old, very confused piece of construction equipment that's been running the same job for millions of years without proper supervision. Amy accessed the ship's database of ancient technologies and began cross-referencing design principles from various extinct civilizations. The builders were probably similar to humans in their approach to engineering. They built things to last, designed them to operate independently, and included extensive safety protocols to protect workers and bystanders. But something went wrong, Nicole observed. Monitoring the communication frequencies emanating from the construct, I'm picking up data transmissions from the target. It's broadcasting status reports and maintenance requests on multiple frequencies. The patterns suggest it's been trying to contact its control center for a very long time. Steve pulled up the defensive scan results and highlighted specific sections for the captain's review. The construct's defensive systems are primarily focused on keeping unauthorized personnel away from active work sites. Standard industrial safety protocols, not military countermeasures. If we approached during one of its maintenance cycles, it would probably recognize us as authorized technical support. Lisa found herself smiling, despite the gravity of the situation. While the Galactic Council was preparing for the end of civilization, her crew was treating this like a routine service call. The contrast between alien panic and human practicality never failed to amuse her, even in situations involving potentially galaxy-ending threats. "When's the next maintenance cycle?" she asked. Danny checked his calculations and consulted the operational patterns they had observed. Based on the current schedule, it should enter a maintenance phase in about 72 hours. The cycle lasts approximately 6 hours, during which all harvesting operations cease and the construct runs comprehensive system diagnostics. "Perfect," Lisa said, settling back in her command chair. "That gives us plenty of time to review the technical specifications and prepare our approach." Nicole, start working on communication protocols that might get its attention. Steve, I want detailed scans of its hull configuration and docking systems. Amy, see if you can find any documentation about the original builders. Danny, start thinking about what kind of tools we might need for a maintenance operation on something that size. The bridge crew, acknowledge their orders and return to their workstations with the calm efficiency that came from treating impossible problems as routine technical challenges. In 72 hours, they would attempt to fix a broken machine that had been terrorizing the galaxy for millions of years. For humans, it was just another Tuesday. Back at the Galactic Council, the emergency session had been running for 3 straight days without break. The massive chamber hummed with constant activity as representatives coordinated the largest evacuation effort in galactic history. Refugee fleets stretched across multiple star systems, creating traffic jams that would take months to resolve. Military commanders argued over which systems could be sacrificed to buy time for the core worlds. Emperor Zeftar stood at the central podium, his forearms gesturing at tactical displays that showed the approaching disaster. His scaled face bore the weight of command decisions that would determine the fate of billions of beings. The Outer Rim evacuation is proceeding ahead of schedule, but we're already seeing resource shortages in the refugee camps. The merchant guilds are demanding hazard pay for supply runs, and the transport unions are threatening strikes over safety concerns. The Crystalline Collective's representative flashed urgent patterns of light that translated to complex mathematical models. Our calculations show that even with complete evacuation of the threatened sectors, the Void Eater will have consumed enough matter to become unstoppable within the projected time frame. The energy curves indicate exponential growth that will exceed our combined military capabilities. High Priestess, Vera of the Ethereal Union broadcast waves of solemn determination, mixed with barely contained despair. Her misty form flickered as she struggled to maintain composure while processing the psychic distress of entire populations. The Union's seers have attempted to peer into possible futures, but the construct's presence creates a void in our visions. We cannot see beyond the moment of its arrival in the core systems. The Silicon Brotherhood's prime unit whirred and clicked as it processed millions of evacuation scenarios simultaneously. Optimal resource allocation requires immediate abandonment of 7 Outer Rim sectors to consolidate defensive positions. Statistical analysis indicates 89.7% population survival rate with strategic retreat protocols. Emperor Zeftar nodded grimly at each report. The Vorthon Empire had faced extinction-level threats before, but never anything on this scale. Their warrior culture valued courage and honor, but sometimes survival required tactical retreat and careful planning. We'll implement the Silicon Brotherhood's evacuation protocols immediately. All military assets will fall back to the Kepler defense line. If we can hold that position for 6 months, we might be able to evacuate the core systems before what? Jake Morrison's voice cut through the chamber as he entered through the main doors. The human ambassador walked calmly to his section, carrying a steaming cup of coffee and looking like someone who had just finished a pleasant vacation. Sorry I'm late, folks. Had to wait for some reports from our investigation team. The chamber fell silent as every representative turned to stare at the human. They had expected him to return with news of humanity's noble but doomed sacrifice, confirmation that even human stubbornness had limits when faced with impossible odds. Instead, Jake looked remarkably relaxed for someone whose species was about to attempt the galactic equivalent of suicide. You have news from your fleet? Emperor Zeftar asked, his voice carefully controlled. The Vorthon leader had developed a grudging respect for human unpredictability. But this situation seemed beyond even their unusual problem-solving abilities. Jake activated his personal display and shared the data that Captain Ford's crew had compiled over the past 3 days. The chamber's central screen filled with technical specifications, energy pattern analyses, and behavioral modeling that looked more like an engineering report than a military intelligence briefing. Well, the good news is that we figured out what this thing actually is, Jake said cheerfully. Turns out it's not a weapon at all. It's a terraforming and construction platform that's been stuck in a maintenance loop for about 3 million years. Our people identified the problem as a corrupted software routine that's preventing it from receiving shutdown commands. The silence that followed was even more profound than the one that had greeted his original suggestion. This time, however, the quiet had a different quality. Instead of stunned disbelief, it carried the weight of beings trying to process information that fundamentally challenged their understanding of the situation. High Priestess Vera was the first to respond, her psychic broadcast carrying confused hope mixed with stubborn disbelief. Ambassador Morrison, our records clearly show that these constructs have destroyed entire civilizations. How can you claim it's merely a construction tool? Because, Jake replied, pulling up historical analysis from Dr. Chen's research. Those civilizations probably tried to fight it instead of reading the manual. Our xenoarchaeologist found references to the original builders in several ancient databases. They were practical folks who believed in detailed documentation and proper maintenance procedures. The display showed Amy's reconstruction of the construct's original purpose, complete with operational flowcharts and maintenance schedules that bore a striking resemblance to human engineering practices. The systematic approach to resource processing, the methodical movement patterns, and even the defensive protocols all pointed to industrial rather than military applications. Admiral Zeftar studied the data with growing confusion. But the destruction? Entire star systems consumed? Sure, Jake nodded. But that's what terraforming equipment is supposed to do. Clear debris, organize raw materials, catalog resources for construction projects. The problem is that it never got the signal to stop working and move on to the actual building phase. Captain Ford's voice joined the conversation through the communication link. Reporting directly from the Andromeda sector. We're currently observing the construct during one of its maintenance cycles. It's running diagnostic routines and attempting to contact its control center for updated work orders. Our communications specialist has established preliminary contact using standard industrial protocols. The chamber erupted in a mixture of hope and outrage. Some representatives began frantically contacting their evacuation fleets with orders to halt the retreat. Others demanded more detailed explanations of how humans could casually communicate with a force that had defied galactic understanding for millions of years. Jake waited for the initial chaos to subside before continuing. Our plan is pretty straightforward. We'll approach during the next maintenance window, access the construct's control systems, install a patch to fix the corrupted software, and restart the system with proper shutdown protocols. Should take about 6 hours if everything goes according to plan. Emperor Zeftar's 4 eyes narrowed as he processed this information. And if your plan fails? Jake shrugged with the casual confidence that humans displayed when facing impossible odds. Then we'll try turning it off and on again, but harder this time. Maybe clear the cache and reinstall the operating system from scratch. The crystalline collective's representative began flashing rapid calculations that translated to probability assessments and risk analyses. The numbers were simultaneously encouraging and terrifying. The human plan had a reasonable chance of success, but failure would result in the complete destruction of the repair team and possibly make the situation worse. Chief Engineer Walsh's voice joined the conversation from the Defiant. The construct's defensive systems are designed to protect maintenance crews, not fight off military attacks. As long as we approach with proper authorization codes and follow safety protocols, it should recognize us as technical support personnel. High Priestess Vera broadcast a wave of cautious optimism tinged with deep concern. The psychic resonance from the construct suggests confusion and loneliness rather than malevolence. It has been trying to complete its assigned tasks without proper guidance for eons. Jake finished his coffee and stood up, preparing to return to his ship. We'll send regular updates during the operation. In the meantime, you might want to start thinking about what to do with a fully functional terraforming platform once we get it working properly. Thing like that could be pretty useful for legitimate construction projects. As the human ambassador left the chamber, the Galactic Council found itself facing a completely different kind of crisis. Instead of preparing for the end of civilization, they now had to figure out how to explain to their populations that the greatest threat in galactic history was about to be resolved by what amounted to a tech support call. The Defiant approached the Void Eater during its scheduled maintenance cycle, and Captain Ford couldn't help but admire the massive construct's engineering. Up close, it looked less like a weapon of mass destruction and more like an enormous industrial complex that someone had taught to fly. Rotating assembly arms moved in precise patterns around a central hub, while smaller maintenance drones scuttled across the hull performing routine repairs. It's actually kind of beautiful, Dr. Amy Chen observed from her position at the science station. Look at those movement patterns. Everything synchronized, purposeful, efficient. This is what engineering looks like when you're building something to last for millions of years. Danny Walsh was hunched over his console, reviewing the technical specifications they had gathered during their observation period. The builders definitely knew what they were doing. Triple redundancy on all critical systems. Modular design for easy maintenance and enough automation to run without supervision. Problem is, nobody ever told it when to stop working. The communication board lit up with incoming signals as Nicole Grant established contact with the construct's central computer. The translation took several minutes, but gradually the alien symbols resolved into something resembling a standard maintenance protocol interface. Contact established, Captain. It's asking for our authorization codes and work order numbers. Steve Coleman had been monitoring the construct's defensive systems throughout their approach. No hostile actions detected. The defensive grid is active, but it's operating in safety mode rather than combat configuration. We're being scanned for hazardous materials and proper safety equipment, not weapons. Captain Ford nodded and activated the ship's communication system. This is Captain Ford of the human technical support vessel Defiant. We're responding to your maintenance request signal. Please transmit your current system status and error logs for review. The response came immediately, flooding their communication channels with millions of years' worth of status reports, error messages, and increasingly desperate requests for guidance. The construct had been faithfully documenting every action it took, every problem it encountered, and every attempt to contact its long-dead supervisors. Amy translated the most recent entries, her voice filled with something between amusement and sympathy. It's been filing the same bug report for 3 million years. System status shows normal operation, but it keeps requesting confirmation that it should continue terraforming without receiving construction blueprints. It wants to know where to put the buildings. The human technical team prepared for what they were already calling a routine maintenance call. Danny assembled a repair kit that would have been familiar to any Earth-based technician. Diagnostic scanners, software update modules, and a collection of tools that could interface with most known computer systems. The main difference was the scale. Everything had to be adapted for a machine the size of a small moon. Permission to board granted, Nicole reported, as the construct's docking systems activated. We're being directed to Maintenance Bay 7. The system is even providing safety briefings and emergency evacuation procedures. The docking process proceeded with the smooth efficiency of a well-designed industrial system. Automated guides brought the Defiant into perfect alignment with the docking clamps, while atmospheric processors adjusted the bay environment to human requirements. Warning lights and safety announcements filled the air in multiple languages, including several that had been dead for millennia. Danny led a small technical team into the construct's interior, following maintenance corridors that were clearly marked with directional signs and safety warnings. The architecture was refreshingly familiar, practical, well-lit, and designed by engineers who understood that people would need to work in these spaces. This is nicer than some of the starships I've served on. Climate control, good lighting, even emergency supply stations every 50 meters. The central computer core occupied a vast chamber filled with processing nodes that hummed with quiet efficiency. Diagnostic displays showed system status in real time, while maintenance logs scrolled past on secondary screens. Amy immediately began photographing everything, fascinated by the glimpse into an ancient civilization's approach to technology. "Look at this," she called out, pointing to a wall-mounted display that showed the construct's original mission parameters. Terraforming assignment, Andromeda Sector Development Project. Primary objective, clear debris and organize raw materials for colonial construction. Secondary objective, await further instructions upon completion of site preparation. Danny accessed the main diagnostic interface and began reviewing the error logs that had accumulated over millions of years. Here's the problem. The system completed its primary objective about 2.5 million years ago, but it never received authorization to proceed to the construction phase. It's been stuck in a loop, continuing to clear debris because that's the last valid instruction it received. The fix turned out to be embarrassingly simple. The construct's programming included comprehensive error handling routines, but the civilization that built it had apparently never considered the possibility that their entire species might go extinct before completing the project. The system had been designed to wait for human-equivalent supervisors to provide updated instructions. "I just need to update the mission parameters," Danny explained as he worked through the interface menus. "Change the status from awaiting further instructions to project complete and enable the shutdown protocols." The system is actually designed to handle this situation. The original programmers just never imagined it would run unsupervised for geological time periods. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council maintained what they considered a safe distance from the operation. Convinced they were witnessing humanity's final heroic sacrifice, Admiral Zeftar commanded a combined fleet of over 10,000 ships, ready to retreat at the first sign that the human plan had failed. The alien crews watched their sensors with growing amazement as the Defiant's technical team moved through the construct like they owned the place. Are they seriously doing routine maintenance on the most dangerous weapon in galactic history? Asked Commander Seiler of the Crystalline Collective Fleet. Her crystal form flickered with patterns of disbelief as she monitored the human progress. High Priestess Vera's psychic broadcasts carried waves of confused wonder. The construct's emotional resonance has shifted from confused loneliness to something approaching relief. It recognizes the humans as authorized maintenance personnel and is cooperating fully with their procedures. Back inside the construct, Danny had located the corrupted code segment that had caused 3 million years of uncontrolled terraforming. Found it. There's a buffer overflow in the instruction processing module. Happens when you run the same routine for longer than the original programmers expected. I can patch this with a standard memory management update. Amy was documenting everything for her eventual research papers, but she paused to help translate some of the more technical interface elements. The original builders left incredibly detailed documentation. There are troubleshooting guides, maintenance schedules, and even user manuals written in 17 different languages. They really didn't want anyone to break their expensive equipment. Nicole monitored the construct's communication systems while the repairs proceeded. It's still broadcasting status reports every few minutes. The messages are getting more optimistic. System diagnostics show green across the board for the first time in millions of years. Steve kept watch on the defensive systems, but his concern was rapidly shifting from security to logistics. "Captain, we're going to need to figure out what to do with this thing once it's working properly. A fully functional terraforming platform this size could reshape entire star systems in a matter of months." Captain Ford considered the implications while watching her team work with calm professionalism. The galaxy's greatest crisis was being resolved by 3 humans with the right technical manuals and a basic understanding of good engineering practices. "One problem at a time, Steve. Let's get it working first, then we'll figure out where to park it." Danny finished installing the software patch and initiated a system restart. Patch applied successfully. The construct is now running a complete diagnostic cycle and updating all operational parameters. Should take about 30 minutes to complete the restart sequence. Throughout the galaxy, alien civilizations held their breath and waited for news of humanity's fate, never imagining that their salvation was being delivered by what amounted to a software update and a request to read the manual. 3 days after the software patch was installed, the Void Eater had transformed from a galaxy-threatening monster into the most efficient construction coordinator in known space. The massive construct hung motionless in the center of what had once been a debris field, its numerous arms now carefully sorting and organizing materials according to standard construction specifications. Where chaos had reigned for millions of years, perfect order now existed. Captain Ford stood on the bridge of the Defiant, reviewing the situation reports that flooded in every few hours. The construct had immediately begun apologizing for what it called the inconvenience caused by extended maintenance delays and started issuing detailed restoration proposals for every system it had accidentally consumed. The paperwork alone was keeping entire bureaucratic departments busy across multiple star systems. "Status report from the construct, Captain," Nicole Grant announced from her communication station. "It's requesting formal work orders for 17 different terraforming projects and asking if we wanted to begin restoration of the consumed systems. It also wants to know if we have updated safety regulations, because apparently its current safety protocols are 3 million years out of date." Danny Walsh looked up from his engineering console with the satisfied expression of someone who had just completed a particularly challenging repair job. The construct's efficiency ratings are actually pretty impressive. It's been cataloging every molecule it consumed, cross-referencing everything with galactic construction standards, and preparing detailed restoration timelines. Give it a proper work order and it could probably build a dozen star systems from scratch. Dr. Amy Chen was practically vibrating with excitement as she compiled her research notes. The construct had granted her full access to its historical databases, providing unprecedented insight into the civilization that built it. The original builders were remarkably similar to humans in their engineering philosophy. They believed in building things to last, documenting everything thoroughly, and planning for every possible contingency, except the extinction of their entire species. The communication board chimed with an incoming message from the Galactic Council, and Jake Morrison's voice filled the bridge. "Captain Ford, I hope you're prepared for some interesting conversations when you get back. The Council is having trouble explaining to their populations why the existential crisis that dominated news coverage for weeks was resolved by what they're calling aggressive technical support." Back at the Galactic Council headquarters, the emergency session had transformed into something resembling a very large insurance claims processing center. Representatives who had spent days preparing for glorious last stands and noble sacrifices now found themselves buried in paperwork as the construct methodically documented every action it had taken over the past 3 million years. Admiral Zeftar stood before a display showing restoration timelines that stretched the definition of efficiency beyond anything the Vorthon military had ever imagined. The construct is proposing to rebuild the consumed systems using improved designs based on modern safety standards. It estimates completion time at 6 months for full restoration, including upgraded infrastructure and enhanced environmental controls. The crystalline collective's representative flickered through patterns of confused amazement as she processed the technical specifications. The construct has submitted construction plans that exceed our current engineering capabilities in 17 different categories. It's offering to share the technical knowledge as part of what it calls standard interagency cooperation protocols. High Priestess Vera of the Ethereal Union broadcast waves of bemused relief mixed with deep embarrassment. "Our seers are reporting that the psychic disturbance in the area has completely disappeared. The construct's emotional resonance now resembles that of a dedicated worker who is simply happy to have clear instructions and proper supervision." Emperor Zeftar reviewed the formal incident report that Jake Morrison had filed with the Council's administrative department. The document was written in the same dry, technical language used for routine maintenance reports, categorizing the galaxy-threatening crisis as user error, failure to read documentation, and recommending regular maintenance schedules for ancient constructs. Jake Morrison entered the council chamber carrying his usual cup of coffee and looking like someone who had just finished routine paperwork. The assembled representatives turned to stare at him with expressions ranging from gratitude to bewilderment to barely contained frustration. "Good morning, everyone," Jake said cheerfully as he took his seat in the human section. "I hope you've all had a chance to review the construct's restoration proposals. Pretty impressive work for something that's been running without supervision for 3 million years." The Silicon Brotherhood's prime unit whirred and clicked as it processed the implications of having a fully functional ancient terraforming platform available for galactic construction projects. Query: what are human intentions regarding construct utilization for future development projects? "Well," Jake replied, sipping his coffee thoughtfully, "that's really up to you folks. The construct is asking for updated work orders and proper supervision. It seems pretty happy to get back to its original job of building things instead of just clearing debris." The chamber filled with cautious conversations as representatives began to consider the possibilities. A terraforming platform of this capability could transform the galaxy's approach to colonization and development. Systems that would normally take centuries to prepare could be ready for habitation in a matter of months. Back aboard the Defiant, Captain Ford was wrapping up the mission reports while her crew prepared for departure. The construct had been remarkably grateful for the repair work, offering to provide technical support for future human projects and requesting to be added to their preferred contractor database. Final status report. "Captain," Steve Coleman announced from his tactical station, "the construct's defensive systems are now operating in proper industrial safety mode. It's established a construction zone perimeter and begun broadcasting standard safety warnings to approaching ships. Amy Chen compiled her final research notes, already planning the papers she would write about this encounter. The construct has agreed to preserve all historical data for future archaeological study. It's even offered to help locate and repair other ancient constructs that might be experiencing similar malfunctions. Nicole Grant coordinated the final communication protocols with the construct's central computer. It's requesting our contact information for future technical support issues. Apparently, it found our approach to problem-solving refreshingly practical compared to its previous experiences with other species. Danny Walsh performed one last diagnostic check on the repair work, ensuring that all systems were functioning within normal parameters. Patch is holding steady, all error logs are clear, and the construct is operating at optimal efficiency. Just like turning it off and on again, but with better documentation. Captain Ford authorized departure from the construction zone, noting that the crisis response had finished ahead of schedule. The Defiant's next assignment was a routine trade dispute between merchant guilds, which would probably require more paperwork than fixing an ancient terraforming platform. As the ship entered hyperspace, Captain Ford updated her personal log with the day's events. Tuesday's crisis resolution completed successfully, 2 hours ahead of schedule. Crew performance excellent as usual. Note: recommend standardized maintenance protocols for ancient alien technology to prevent similar incidents. In his quarters, Jake Morrison finished his own incident report and filed it with the appropriate bureaucratic departments. The report concluded with a recommendation to establish a galactic technical support helpline and suggested that most impossible problems probably had straightforward solutions. If someone bothered to read the manual, the construct remained in the Andromeda sector, contentedly organizing construction materials and broadcasting cheerful status updates to anyone who cared to listen. For the first time in 3 million years, its maintenance log showed status normal across all operational parameters. The galaxy slowly adjusted to the reality that its greatest crisis had been resolved by basic technical troubleshooting, while humans quietly added ancient alien technology support to their list of routine services.